Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Hadro in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thanks for joining us. In this week's show, Pope Francis reinforces the Church's opposition to the death penalty. Our expert panel breaks down what that means. Argentina's Senate votes on whether or not to legalize abortion. And this.
I absolutely converted because I discovered how evil contraception was, and that is why I entered the church.
In a new documentary, a musician explores how Humana Vitae responds to the sexual revolution's empty promises. But first, we take a closer look into a California congressional race involving a pro-life candidate you might recognize. Kimberlin Brown Pelzer is a longtime actress who starred in soap operas, including The Bold and the Beautiful, but now the wife and mother is entering the political scene as the Republican candidate for California's 36th congressional district. The pro-life group Susan B. Anthony List has endorsed Brown Pelzer in her race for the U.S. House of Representatives, calling her a fearless pro-life advocate. Kimberlin Brown Pelzer, a longtime actress, now a Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives and California's 36th district, joins us from Palm Springs, California. Kimberlin, thank you for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. First off, why are you running for Congress? I think our viewers would be interested to know when you decided to take a turn from acting into politics.
You know, I really believe it's time for good conservatives to step up to the plate to make a difference. We need to have that honesty back in Washington the way that it used to be, somebody who's going with our voice. I just feel that for the first time in the history of our country, we are not leaving something better to our future generations. And unfortunately, I don't want to be a part of that generation that leaves a worse off America than the one I inherited from my parents and my grandparents.
I know the pro-life Susan B. Anthony List has endorsed you in your race. If you don't mind sharing, when did you decide you wanted to become and that you were pro-life?
Well, you know, I've always been pro-life. You know, at one time I thought with certain circumstances, and as you get older and as you mature and your opinions change, you know, you really can't have it both ways. It has to be one way or the other. It's either a yes or a no vote, and I am definitely for pro-life.
As someone who has spent a significant part of your career acting, I'm curious, did you ever get pushback for your pro-life views in Hollywood?
You know, surprisingly, my views in Hollywood really weren't that different. I have a lot of friends that are liberal but feel the same way I do. I find that we tend to agree on more than we disagree. And the pro-life issue was actually one that was very, very strong with friends that I worked with as well. So I never got that Hollywood blowback until I decided to run for office. And then it just came at me because I had an R next to my name.
Well, that room for dialogue that you mentioned is encouraging to hear. I'd like to turn now to policy. In your state, California legalized assisted suicide back in 2016. There has been some recent back and forth in the courts regarding its legality, but in 1 year alone, it was estimated that over 500 people lost their lives to assisted suicide in California. What is your reaction to that news?
You know, I believe that with the new Right to Try Act, those people that are terminally ill that really never believed that they had an alternative, now they do. And I hope that they're taking a close look at that. I understand how families don't want to see family members suffer, but I truly believe that there's really only one person, and that's somebody bigger than all of us that makes that decision.
Kimberlyn, we recently saw the Supreme Court rule that California pro-life pregnancy centers do not have to promote or refer abortions. How significant is the Supreme Court in the pro-life movement, in your opinion?
You know, the pro-life movement, as much noise as we make, we don't make enough. You've always heard that term. It's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. Well, the other side's been getting oiled for a very, very, very long time. But I think with our new appointees to courts all across the United States in record numbers, we're finally going to have a voice. We're finally going to have our point of view brought to the forefront. And with these new additions to the Supreme Court, and hopefully another one coming up later, I think we're going to be able to make some real headway.
And finally, if you are elected, what would you do to advance the pro-life cause in our nation?
I would take the voices of the people, because like I said before, the voices haven't been heard for far too long. People feel as though no one's been listening. I will definitely be that person that listens, and I will definitely be that person that goes to champion for all of us.
Kimberlin Brown Pelzer, Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in California's 36th District. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
And we go now to our guest in studio, Autumn Christensen, Policy Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Autumn, welcome back.
Thank you.
I want to hit on something that Kimberlin Brown Pelzer just mentioned, the role of the Supreme Court in the pro-life movement. How pivotal is the High Court in advancing a culture of life?
You know, it's crazy to think it's been 45 years since the Supreme Court imposed abortion until birth on this country. And in that time, we are one of just 7 countries that allow abortion after 20 weeks. It's really time to give that decision and that right to decide the fate of unborn children back to the people.
And so the next step now is this whole process to confirm nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. What does that timeline look like?
So all eyes are on October the 1st. The goal is to get to October the 1st and have this nominee confirmed. Majority Leader McConnell has agreed that that is the deadline and he is going to get it done. So right now, senators are meeting with the nominee, and then in September we expect to see a hearing, and quickly after that, a floor vote and a confirmation.
All before midterm elections.
That's right.
That's huge. And I know the Susan B. Anthony List is very involved and active in this. What all is the Susan B. Anthony List doing?
Yeah, so we've kicked off a campaign in 6 states, 26 events, calling on senators to vote yes to confirm the nominee. And we don't see any reason why a senator should not, particularly a senator who is a self-described pro-life Democrat, should not vote to confirm this well-qualified judge.
And I mentioned this is all coming before the midterm elections, so how are these senators responding to the efforts done by the Susan B. Anthony List, all these different rallies and such?
Sure. Well, we're starting to see the initial icy response from the Democrat side of the aisle starting to thaw some. So initially the word was that most Democrats were not even going to meet with the nominee, with Judge Kavanaugh, and now they are starting to say that they will meet with him. So only time will tell whether that translates to a yes vote or whether they're just going through the motions.
So all eyes, October 1st, Supreme Court, really important. Autumn Christensen at the Susan B. Anthony List, thank you again for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh is President Trump's nominee to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court. As the Senate prepares to confirm the federal appeals court judge to the High Court, it can't be overstated how pivotal of a moment this is for the pro-life movement. Justice Kennedy has been a swing vote on abortion for decades. Confirming Kavanaugh to replace Kennedy on the High Court would mean confirming a justice who believes in the Constitution and the right to life. Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh could be the deciding vote in a possible future case that could overturn the Roe v. Wade decision. With that, we go to this week's call to action. Tell your senators to confirm Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Here's how you can do that. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Type in some of your basic information so we can craft the message to be for your senators, and click submit at the bottom of the screen. Kavanaugh, a devout Catholic, has served on the D.C. Circuit Court for more than a decade. During his time on the bench, he forcefully rejected the ACLU's assertion of a new constitutional right of abortion on demand for illegal immigrant minors in U.S. custody. And in the case Priests for Life versus HHS, Kavanaugh refused to apply the HHS contraceptive mandate to religious entities. Now that President Trump has announced Kavanaugh is his Supreme Court pick, it's up to the U.S. Senate to confirm him. Let's put the pressure on the Senate to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the High Court. Again, the significance here cannot be overstated. Nominating and confirming Kavanaugh is a critical step towards possibly overturning the devastating Roe v. Wade decision. Go to prolifeweekly.com to tell your senators to confirm Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh. We go now to pro-life headlines from around the globe. Argentina's Senate has begun a session to decide on whether or not to legalize elective abortions. The lower house of Congress has already passed the measure, and President Mauricio Macri says he would sign it. The bill would allow elective abortions in the first 14 weeks of gestation in Pope Francis's homeland. As of this show's recording, voting results were not yet in. Also in South America, both pro-lifers and abortion advocates testified in front of Brazil's top court last Friday on whether or not the court should legalize abortion during the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. Abortion is legal for 3 exceptions already in Brazil: if a woman is raped, if a pregnancy endangers a woman's health, or if the baby is brain dead. Brazil is home to the world's largest population of Catholics. And in Chile, the Senate Committee on Health has introduced a bill that would legalize abortion for any reason up to 14 weeks of pregnancy. Pro-life groups are pushing back to any efforts to expand abortion in their nation, and Chilean President Sebastián Piñera has promised to oppose abortion, saying he will do, quote, everything that is necessary to defend life. Also making worldwide headlines, Pope Francis has revised the Catechism to teach the death penalty is inadmissible. A new draft of paragraph 2267 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church was issued by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith last week, after Pope Francis approved it back in May. Until the announcement, the Catechism taught cases for execution are very rare, if not practically non-existent. But now the Catechism says, in part, the Church teaches in the light of the gospel that the death penalty is inadmissible because it is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person, and she works with determination for its abolition worldwide. To break down what this all means, we turn now to our expert panel. Father Thomas Petri is a moral theologian and academic dean at the Dominican House of Studies. Dr. Matthew Bunson is a Catholic historian, theologian, and a senior contributor here at EWTN. Thank you both for being here. Really important conversation to have.
Thanks for having me.
Good to be with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. First off, is this a change in church teaching?
No, the headlines last week were saying this when the revision of the Catechism came out, but the Holy Father is not changing the church teaching because the Pope cannot change church teaching. The church teaches that the state has a right to use the death penalty. The Holy Father, in this revision, following upon John Paul II's revision in 1997, is simply saying that given certain circumstances in modern society, the death penalty really ought not to be used. It's inadmissible, he says.
What spurred this development?
Well, the key is the phrase, the very word that Pope Francis uses, inadmissible. Building, as his father said on the 1997 revision of John Paul II, who used the term very rare, if not non-existent. Right. That's an important qualifier because what we're seeing in the Western world, a better understanding of the penal system, a better understanding of rehabilitation, a better way of detention. So we are moving away in the Western world, at least, from the traditional need for capital punishment. And so we have seen this as a fairly consistent series of programs and statements from the modern popes, from John Paul II to Pope Benedict XVI, who also advocated for the abolition of the death penalty, now to Pope Francis, who's re-emphasizing all of the points of his most immediate predecessors.
I see. And Father Petri, as the Dominican here, what was it that Church Doctor St. Thomas Aquinas taught about capital punishment?
Well, St. Thomas Aquinas, like everyone of his day and most of the Church Fathers and Scripture, would see punishment primarily to redress and to restore the common good, that a crime takes something from the community, and that there are some crimes, the Church teaching has said, that simply can only be repaid by the offender's life through the penalty of death. So St. Thomas was always very clear that the death penalty was something that the state could do. He, like many others, encouraged Christians not to participate in it themselves, but he also said the death penalty ought not to be used if it creates more evil than good. He was always very clear on that. So the question is, what creates more evil than good? Does the death penalty actually create good that outweighs any evil it might also create?
That being said, how do we view past cases of capital punishment?
The church has always taught that the death penalty is acceptable, so this doesn't change that. We can look back, and as most conscientious persons do, and wonder, was this case a legitimate use of the death penalty? Was this person innocent really or guilty really? And that will always be the case, but it doesn't change the nature of the death penalty as it's applied, because the death penalty is not intrinsically evil. Abortion remains intrinsically evil. It will always be intrinsically evil. The death penalty, and the Holy Father has not declared the death penalty as intrinsically evil. The principle is that the punishment should fit the crime, but that also, given what we understand now about, as Matthew said, Dr. Bunson said, that it should also lead towards rehabilitation and the protection of society. And in the Western world, in the developed world, we tend to see that taking an offender's life is no longer necessary.
That really is key, that word intrinsic evil, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. And when we go back to the way that the revision of the Catechism has been written, we see the use of the word inadmissible that we've talked about several times now. That is a world apart from the possible decision to use the term like intrinsically evil. So we're making it clear again that capital punishment is not intrinsically evil in the same way that we consider and teach very powerfully that abortion is intrinsically evil. But we're also looking at the dignity of the human person within the context of the modern world, but we can also look back in time. You were just asking about the death penalty in history. Christians fought against the pagan Roman Empire, and one of the weapons that was used against Christians was the institutional injustice of the death penalty upon them. We are now living for the last 300 years or so with the use of the death penalty under similar circumstances to pagan Rome.
Wow.
We're living in a kind of neo-pagan culture today. Think of the French Revolution. No one could argue that the French Revolution had a fair application of the death penalty. Certainly, the Soviet Union didn't. The communist governments like China don't. Nazi Germany certainly did not. And in a culture today where the dignity of the human person is under threat from so many different directions, abortion, euthanasia, the wearing away of our understanding of the human person, our resistance to the death penalty assumes sort of the context of doing everything we can in culture to help people form their consciences properly in how we build up the dignity of the human person, but also to resist our temptation to wear it away.
That is incredible context to keep in mind. And speaking about the dignity of the human person, what about the dignity of the criminal person? Do they lose their inherent dignity after the crime if they are on death row?
No, they never. By simply being a member of the human species, we believe everybody has an inalienable, intrinsic human dignity made in the image of God, regardless of ability or disability, regardless of creed, regardless of race, regardless of financial and social status, and in fact, regardless of what we have done and what we haven't done. Now, what they do lose is a certain dignity as a citizen in our society because they are being imprisoned, but they never lose, and the Church has never taught, and to my knowledge, no Christian has ever taught or thought that criminals somehow lose their dignity. St. Thomas made a comment that people often use in this regard. He said that criminals can be executed if they've committed a very serious crime because they're more like beasts. And people often say that St. Thomas says that they don't have any dignity after they commit a crime, but he doesn't say that. I would argue what he's actually saying is that they are losing their status within society. And that's something I think everyone agrees with, that when you commit a crime, you lose certain privileges as a citizen.
And finally, we are on Pro-Life Weekly. So for our viewers, our Catholic viewers who are passionate about the pro-life issue, how should they view the capital punishment issue in the wider frame of all life issues?
Well, we have to be careful to fall into sort of a false equating of the death penalty with something like abortion. We have the arguments we've been hearing for a long time about the seamless garment. Capital punishment is listed now in the Catechism as inadmissible, as a prudential application of the Church's understanding. Abortion is intrinsically evil. Euthanasia is intrinsically evil. So that's a balance that we have to maintain and keep in front of us as we discuss this issue.
I think that Dr. Bunson is exactly correct here, that by focusing on the death penalty as a way in which life is taken, by insisting that even criminals, that their lives should not be taken in the modern world, all the more now we should be able to focus on that the innocent, that their lives cannot be taken in abortion and euthanasia.
Thank you both for your incredible clarity and knowledge on this important issue.
It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you so much.
When we come back,
when people think of the sexual revolution, then they immediately think of 1969, hippies, Woodstock. It was the free love movement that has led to generations of people looking for real love.
a new documentary explores the emptiness of the sexual revolution and the beauty of the church's teaching on life. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. To be a mother is to nourish and protect true humanity and bring it to development. That's a quote from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, or Edith Stein, as we remember the great saint on her feast day this Thursday, August 9th. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. For this week's Speak Out segment, a slew of celebrities are spreading Planned Parenthood's talking points and what the abortion giant is calling their manifesto film.
We must have the freedom to decide for ourselves whether or when to have children. This includes access to abortion.
Birth control is basic health care.
This video is part of Planned Parenthood's new Unstoppable campaign. This 3-minute video includes women reciting the abortion giant's, quote, manifesto. It also includes cameos from actresses Elizabeth Banks, Mayim Bialik of Big Bang Theory fame, Felicity Huffman, and Top Chef host Padma Lakshmi. The soundtrack to the video is a song by singer Sia. It's disappointing to see these celebrities use their influential platform to further spread Planned Parenthood's talking points. These are powerful women here. And these women in their significant positions, I believe, have a responsibility to help other women. Women in unexpected pregnancies, young moms, mothers in poverty. Instead, they're using their voice to promote the nation's largest abortion industry, a business that preys on women in unexpected pregnancies, young moms, and mothers in poverty. This new Planned Parenthood Unstoppable campaign drums up fear among women because the abortion industry and culture of death can only thrive on fear. And Planned Parenthood is once again cozying up to Hollywood and the entertainment industry in an attempt to glamorize their work, which is very ugly. I know these celebrities are used to memorizing lines, but I hope and pray they find a new script soon. Remember, you always have a role in countering today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com and tell your senators to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. A new film explores how the sexual revolution failed to deliver on any of its promises, all while Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae has proven to be prophetic. We introduce you to this film and some of its filmmakers in this week's Pro-Life Focus.
When people think of the sexual revolution, then they immediately think of 1969, hippies, Woodstock. It was the free love movement that has led to generations of people looking for real love.
A new documentary, Sexual Revolution, 50 Years Since Humanae Vitae, explores the fallout of the free love era.
You're the reason I believe in love.
The film's narrator is singer-songwriter Alana Newman.
The man I love today is a carpenter.
A wife and mother, Newman also profoundly understands the pain from the sexual revolution and fatherlessness, as her father was a sperm donor who remained anonymous.
The documentary actually started out with my husband filming me. We thought that we were on a journey to find my biological father, who was a sperm donor. And over the course of the 7 years, the purpose of the film has transformed.
After interviewing a series of experts, the Sexual Revolution movie team discovered the birth control pill's dark history.
I was most shocked when I learned that Dr. Gregory Pincus, the scientist who invented the first birth control pill, Innovid, he experimented on women in insane asylums.
She said that we need to find a cage of ovulating females to test the pill on. They found this cage in the Worcester Insane Asylum. And so this is the population that Dr. Pincus decided he should do experiments on.
To Newman, it was obvious. The start of the sexual revolution was profoundly anti-woman.
The inventors of the pill and the sexual revolution folks, they promised that there would be fewer abortions. You know, if everybody can take the pill, there'd be fewer single moms, fewer abortions, and that is absolutely not true. We've seen that there's more abortions.
The film's director, Daniel De Silva, reiterates that free love is a lie.
I mean, in their interpretation of this free love concept, they wanted sex, frankly, sex without babies. They wanted to love one another without any responsibilities because they thought that was going to make them happy.
But this documentary does have good news to share.
The small group of scientists that developed the pill, they were actually colleagues with the group of scientists that developed natural family planning.
The Sexual Revolution movie examines the parallel beginnings between the pill and modern natural family planning methods.
John and Evelyn Billings were not teaching the old rhythm method. What they pioneered was modern natural family planning, NFP.
For Newman, who was born and raised as an atheist in San Francisco, the beauty of NFP prompted her conversion to the Catholic Church 4 years ago.
I absolutely converted because I discovered how evil contraception was, and that is why I entered the church. Because if Catholics were the only people to get this question right, I wanted to know what else they were right about.
The Catholic Church plays a pivotal role in the film as the backdrop is set to Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae, which reiterated the Church's teachings on life and love.
Humanae Vitae is a masterpiece. It itself is a work of art. The Pope, with the help of John Paul II, as we have learned, and others, wrote in Humanae Vitae a love letter to humanity.
To see the new Sexual Revolution movie, you'll need to schedule a screening. The filmmakers say it's definitely worth a watch.
Whether you want to debate this issue or whether you want to watch the debate, this is an important film.
And I want people to walk away feeling like if they were scared to take an NFP class before, or if they were scared to become an NFP teacher before, I want them to be excited to learn NFP, excited to teach NFP, and just feel really good about the church and how the church, through its members, has revealed this amazing knowledge about the female body.
Revelation as revolution.
If you want to request a screening of Sexual Revolution, you can email events@sexualrevolutionmovie.com or go to sexualrevolutionmovie.com for more details. That'll do it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, but I'd love to hear from you before next week. Email me at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or like my public page on Facebook so we can keep this pro-life conversation going. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.